Some technical problems here. Just going to get those straightened out. So, folks come to church for lots of reasons. We come for comfort when we are troubled or sad. We come for healing when we are wounded and raw. We come for companionship when we are lonely and when we seek to share. We come for learning. We come for the sake of curiosity. We come for the sake of having our ideas and our beliefs challenged. We come for some combination of these reasons, and we come for other reasons altogether. Whatever the reason, there is an expectation underlying every reason. We come expecting an impact, expecting to be touched in ways lasting and profound. Like our reasons for being here, the source of the impact is also multiple. We get impact from this atmosphere of beauty and music. Impact from the company of our fellow sojourners sitting here with us in the pews. Impact, maybe, from the message out of the pulpit, fingers crossed. Impact from the chance to pray, to hold silent, to sink into restfulness when life is stressful and difficult. Impact from some of this, all of this, or something else altogether. Nina Barbarov was a Russian writer born before the fall of the last Tsar in 1901, and she lived as an emigre in Berlin and then Paris before becoming a U.S. citizen in 1959. She died in 1993. Her life was such that she welcomed and she sought impact, the transformation that challenge brings. And she wrote, "I have learned to seek intensity rather than happiness, not joys and prosperity, but the more of life, a concentrated sense of life, a strengthening feeling of existence, fullness, and concentration of pulse, energy, growth, flowering, far beyond the image of happiness or unhappiness." May you yourself today, in all that you seek, open yourself to a seeking frame of mind, awaiting and eager for an impact on your spirit and on your life. So let's sing together. Hymn, I think it's 108, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. Please rise in body and spirit. So let's settle our bodies and our minds for a time of reflection, meditation, and prayer. American poet Ellen Bass wrote, "The thing is, to love life, you have to love it even when you have no stomach for it, and everything you'd held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, your throat filled with the silt of it. Then you'll hold life like a face between your palms, a plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, 'Yes, I will take you. I will love you again.' May we love even when we have no stomach for it. May we love when life is plain, when it holds no charms. May we love when we are so vulnerable, so scarred, that we feel our own fear and disappointment will engulf us, swallow us whole and completely. May we seek love most when we feel battered and flayed by life. May we seek to love most at that moment from that place where we feel least able to love. Spirit of life and love, call us from the trees and the winds, call us from the buildings of brick and wood, call us from deep within ourselves. Spirit of life and love, call us back to you, to your welcome in companionship, call us toward our desire for justice, call us into what will expand our beings. Make us more than we are, more than we can ever be alone, more sure that by loving life, even when it crumbles like burned paper, we can be healed in the embrace of life as long as we have each other. So, dear friends, I begin this morning with 3 stories of impact, of difference making. And I introduced some language from my experience at GA, at General Assembly, at Ministry Days. I introduced some of that language last week. These are stories, these stories I'm going to tell. These are stories that get proximate, get close to the real injustice visited upon real people. And they show the reason why it's necessary to flip the narrative from fear and anger. And they put us in a position to do uncomfortable things. So in like the old Sesame Street song, one of these is not like the other. Let's see if you can spot it. There won't be a test later. So the first story is a paraphrase of one I heard many years ago on a national public radio broadcast. In the story, the commentator is describing herself as young and feeling a little lost at a family gathering, a family reunion in the South. And it's 1963, and the girl is just 10 years old, and she's African American. And desegregation is still in full swing, though it's not such a smooth path anymore. People who look like her and her family are regularly publicly reviled, beaten, sometimes lynched, even burned. And she is 10 years old, feeling awkward and unlovely as 10-year-olds do, all long, skinny arms and legs. And here she is among all the curvaceous mothers and aunties with their fabulous dresses and hairstyles that she's too young to wear. She feels lost and unnoticed. And in the midst of the hundreds of family members, a photographer is wrangling folks into order for the big group photo. It's coming together, everyone is lining up, and he approaches the little girl, holds her by her narrow shoulders as he gently maneuvers her into just the right spot. And as he gets her into place, he gives her a little squeeze and says, "My, those are some strong shoulders, little girl." And he smiles into her eyes before moving on to orient the next person into the photo. The little girl is blooming with pride and happiness. She has strong shoulders. She has been noticed by an adult. She is a person worthy of attention. She feels good. She stands up straight and tall as she beams into the camera lens. Even years later, the woman who was the little girl can feel the impact that photographer made on her, how he helped her in that moment and far beyond that moment in ways that sustained her through the trials of growing up in a country regularly expressing hatred toward her and people who look like her. Story number 2. Hurricane Harvey is being called the most powerful storm to hit the United States since 2005, when hurricanes Katrina and Rita devastated the Gulf Coast. Harvey is another so-called storm of the century, in a century just 17 years old. So much extreme and disruptive weather is evidence of global climate change and not just a matter of annual vagaries of El Nino. As of 9:20 this morning, only 2 deaths had been reported, but the storm surge has already caused massive evacuations. And let me say that again. 2 deaths have been reported. That matters to the people who've lost loved ones. And the storm surge has already caused massive evacuations, as well as visible damage to electric and water infrastructure, as well as buildings and roads. In the proposed government budget, the National Flood Insurance Program is something slated to receive significantly less funding. The city of Houston, site of the gasoline industry, is in the path of Hurricane Harvey, and they have received feet of rain so far. Historic African American neighborhoods have become the locations of petrochemical plants, incinerator facilities, and oil storage facilities for Valero and Texaco. Not in my backyard doesn't work for the people who live in those neighborhoods. We know what happened to the environment and the health of the people when the levees were breached in Hurricane Katrina, as flood water and storm surge churned toxic chemicals and petroleum into neighborhoods. The impact was devastating and also unjust. The poor harmed in irrevocable ways because they already lived in neglected and unprotected places. These neglected and unprotected people, very poor and often African American. Story number 3. On Friday, the president pardoned Joe Arpaio, former sheriff of Maricopa County, Arizona, a man legally tried, found guilty, and convicted of criminal contempt of court for refusing to stop racially profiling Latino and Latina people on suspicion, because of how they looked, on suspicion of illegal immigration status. In other words, Arpaio ordered his deputies to look at people and judge them by their presumed ethnicity and then their presumed immigration status. Under such conditions, a Latino citizen could be pulled over again and again and have to prove their legal status. Latina citizens could never travel without papers that proved they are citizens, could never be sure they would not be detained, even jailed, while the legitimacy of their documents was verified. Now, I was traveling in Arizona while Arpaio was sheriff. As I drove along the beautiful canyonlands, I saw cars full of people, brown people, pulled over, searched, and detained. Our car was always waved on. Our car, with the large white man in the driver's seat and the smaller white woman in the passenger seat. Normal. I wonder what they would have done if they had looked more closely at us. At the mixed-race child riding in the back seat, a friend of our daughter on this trip with us. What might have happened if she had been riding shotgun one day? This presidential pardon is a slap in the face of the Latino and Latina people Arpaio terrorized and would have continued to terrorize if he were not forced into court, where he was confronted with the illegality of this massive racial profiling. Arpaio defied the legal system, and by pardoning him, the president is also defying the legal system, the very constitution that founds our country. I make here a factual, not a political statement. Our courts and our sense of morality will be impacted for years to come by this decision in ways we can't yet count. 3 stories about impactful human relationships. I think you know which one is not like the others. It's painful to get close to the stories of men and women and children who will be mistreated within a social system founded in individual freedom and justice for all. Beliefs I hold close. I feel an anger that I believe is justified when I realize the human suffering done here by other human beings, and often by people who look like me. I'm uncomfortable looking at such situations because I feel powerless to do anything about them. I don't know what it is I can do. The problem seems so large, so vast. And let's face it, it is easier to sympathize than to empathize. And when I say sympathize and empathize here, I'm using definitions I learned in chaplaincy training and from family systems theory. When we feel sympathy, when we are having a sympathetic response, a like for like response, and a like for like response is possible when the people involved are similar to us or when we are familiar with the situation. It's easy to feel for the small girl in the first story because I have been young and I have felt alone and forgotten, even especially at family gatherings. But I am not an African American person, and so I can't really sympathize with that added layer of living in a country that tells me that black skin is ugly, black skin is worthless, black skin can be destroyed. I can't sympathize with that. That's not my experience. I can sympathize with a storm evacuation or a traffic stop, but not with a fragile coastline vulnerable to climate change, whose destruction will pollute my neighborhood more than others. I can't sympathize with ongoing efforts to undermine my human dignity because of the color of my skin. But I can empathize. I can be willing to feel the pain of those who do not look like me or who do not share similar life circumstances. I can empathize. And I can do this if I am willing to open myself to their stories and hear their experiences and be willing to learn that even if I do not experience some things in this country, they are nevertheless true things. They are really happening. And they are really happening to actual living people. People worthy of dignity and security, the same dignity and security that I normally receive in the course of my normal life. So what's the way to do this? What is the way to learn to empathize more? Well, I talked a little bit last week, it's okay if you weren't here. I talked a little bit last week in more detail about getting really close to real oppression, about moving beyond my own fear, about being willing to be uncomfortable. And those are good practices. Those are things to keep in mind and to try to work at. And at General Assembly this year in New Orleans, there were many sessions devoted to just these efforts to confront our discomfort and to try to learn new ways to interact with a spectrum of people. Mary Beth and Peter Gamba, some of our fellow congregants here, they're not here today, they were delegates at GA, and I understand that they have this year's program as well as programs from other years. And they'll be ready to share those when we return to Cooley Road and have conversation about their experiences during coffee hour. The GA program, the General Assembly program from this year and the ones in past years, they show similar patterns. Workshops that are efforts to engage the racism, the sexism, the homophobia, all the nasty isms and phobias that we have in this country that plague our society, our world, that plague us. Unitarian Universalists are always trying to engage those wrongs. The thing is, we are not separate or above all of that. That's all part of the interdependent web of which we are all a part. And so we're enmeshed in all this injustice too. I don't know about you, but that feels overwhelming to me. What I'm fighting is also part of what I'm swimming in. However, I seek a change, and I know you do too, friends. I desire a different world, one where both sympathy and empathy abound, one where difference simply is, and no one is threatened by it or feels the need to crush it out of existence. I desire a world where no defenseless people are left in polluted and vulnerable environments, where no one is terrorized because of cultural variances. We desire a different world, one of justice, of peace, of compassionate companionship. And so we must seek to create an impact, even when and perhaps because life crumbles like burnt paper. No tinkering around the edges is enough. We seek transformation. So what do we do? How do we do it? Wendell Berry, a great environmentalist and lover of justice, he writes, It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. That quotation really speaks to me. It helps me to fight my own hopelessness. And fighting my own hopelessness is one of those injunctions that my minister colleagues at GA called out for me to do, to fight my own hopelessness. I like to know the answers. I like to know the correct path of action. I like to know what the outcomes will be before I act. Uncertainty worries me. It troubles me. But fight my own hopelessness, that anything can be healed or repaired. Fight I must. And I pray you will fight too. Because fighting my own hopelessness, fighting your own hopelessness, is the only way we're going to be strong enough to do the final thing my colleagues at GA asked me to do and asked me to inspire you to do, and that is acknowledge the ugly history of our society and even our religious association, to acknowledge that ugly history as the way to liberation from it. By being truth seekers and truth tellers, no matter how much it hurts my heart or my pride or the myths of being better than or above all the badness. We're all on the web. There is no place else to be. Christian theologian Howard Thurman tells us that things do not happen merely. They are part of some kind of rationale. If this can be tracked down and understood, then the living experience, however terrible, makes sense. To engage in tracking down the truth about injustice and racism and their causes, engaging our rational minds, that matters to us, engaging our rational minds. That actually is to have our hearts in a holy place. When we face our own discomfort, when we reject fear and hopelessness, when we get close to the real life problems of real life people, we can have a profound impact on ourselves and on others. Blessed by love and amazing grace. We begin with ourselves, telling our stories of oppression and of oppressing, listening first to ourselves honestly and with a loving mind. We find the courage to share our stories of oppression and oppressing with each other, with those with whom we feel close and alike in sympathy, with those with whom we sympathize. And with honesty and vulnerability, we impact each other with our courage to tell these truths about how we've been in the world. And when we begin to trust the wisdom in each other, in each person, in every experience, no matter how different from our own understanding of reality, then we can really empathize. Then we can really learn to see stories that can never be our stories and to see them as true. And we can learn to stand as allies, respectfully supporting the efforts of those more immediately impacted, more who know better than we do what living in justice feels like. In this effort, in this confrontation with our own limitations, and in our willingness to be vulnerable, we may feel the impact of the holy in our hearts and our spirits. So let's build a new way, friends. Let us be the people kindly and gently affirming the small, frightened girl in all of her experience. May our impact be to stand with those defenseless and worn down by the toxins in our environment and the violence of our changing planetary system. Let us stand against racial profiling and terror of all kinds. As we build, we will get stronger. We will make a better world. We will make an impact for the good and the right, for the true and the just. Yes, friends, let us make the promise today and every day that we will make these efforts today and every day. As you remember, you are loved, you are worthy, you are welcome, and you are needed. May you feel it so. So take hands or touch elbows as you're comfortable, and Ellie's going to lead us in the words that are printed in your order of service.
We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of the community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Back from making impact, ready to make more. Amen.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.